Hey, how's it going? This is Alex Baker. I'm joined here by Adam Scherer, aka ShipMyMoney DFS. Adam, how are you doing today, man?
Doing good, man. Enjoying football. Glad to have a lineup worth talking about. Um, Excited for week 5.
Yeah, can't wait to break down your lineup here. Congratulations, first of all, taking down the fantasy draft main event this past weekend for 100K.
Thanks, thanks.
How are you feeling?
Good, good. It had been a while. I hadn't gotten one. I hadn't had 100K since like 2016, so it was nice to get back on the board. Always fun, obviously, when that happens.
So I know we talk a lot of MLB on a regular basis, and NBA. I know you've been doing content for years. NFL, you're like more relatively new to the game. So how did you kind of like make the transition from NBA and how to get involved in fantasy football?
Yeah, so like I had never really played a whole lot of NFL DFS before, just because normally it overlaps with NBA, which is my best DFS sport, and normally I'm getting like kind of burnt out and kind of just stopped paying attention to NFL. But I felt like I gotten a good MME process in place with basketball and baseball earlier this year, and this is my first year full time MMEing tournaments, and so I felt like I could translate most of that over to NFL. And with the projections that we have, with everything that we have in place, it's not like I needed to be doing a whole lot of legwork on my own. I knew that I could pretty easily take stuff and apply it to my lineups, so it wouldn't be a huge learning curve. So I've been doing that for the first few weeks. Main stuff for me is obviously projections. I personally aggregate from various sources, including our own. Our ownership projections play a really big role for me, and then really just kind of putting those things together and trying to get lineups that are project well without being too popular. So it's something that obviously that carries across sports, where you're trying to just play the best lineups that you can that are also somewhat unique.
Chris Godwin at 1% owned. He came through with 44 fantasy points. Until that morning, people didn't even know if he was going to play or not. There's some midnight tweets kind of indicating that he's expected to play. How did that injury situation play into your process?
Normally in that situation, I tend to lean towards, especially with someone like Godwin, where he's young. Like there's no reason for Tampa to be like forcing it. So if he's going to play, I tend to assume that he's good to go. Especially even if there's some uncertainty around it, and I think that's my approach too, because players like that, you tend to get lower ownership because people don't want to take the risk of him just being a decoy or him being limited. And to me, with someone as good as Godwin, that's something that I'm not really worried about, because the upside that he brings. This might have been my only lineup with him. I think I only had like 1, maybe 2%. So it definitely wasn't a core play for me, but it was the kind of guy that does get into some of my lineups because I projected him reasonably well, and we obviously had him projected for very low ownership. It's one of the craziest DFS sweats I've had, not even because of the money involved, just because normally, towards the end of a tournament, in like the fourth quarter of a football game or a basketball game or whatever, if someone overtakes you for first place, you're kind of normally screwed, and it doesn't usually get that exciting at the very end. But this one to me was kind of more comparable to like a poker head to head, where he would take the lead, and then the next series I would pass him and he would come back. The guy that got second had more players in the Tampa Bay Rams game, which was obviously the one that ended up really mattering down the stretch. But I think he had Robert Woods, I had Cooper Kupp from the Rams, and then I had Leonard Fournette. He had Jameis Winston. So I remember Fournette had like an 80-yard run and got tackled at the 12, which put me in the first, but it was still frustrating because it could have just like really launched me. And then Winston immediately came back and hit Evans for like an 80-yard touchdown to put me back in the second. And then Cooper Kupp had a nice catch and run too. I think that's what finally put me in first and locked it up. I go at least 2 pass catchers and at least 1 player from the other team. Here I only went with the 1 pass catcher because I just didn't want to restrict myself. Like Lamar Jackson obviously can get points on his own with his legs, and also just kind of spreads the ball around. I didn't feel like I needed to have every Lamar Jackson lineup have both of Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown, or some other pass catcher on the Ravens that's even less appealing. I felt like I could kind of get away, because Jackson can get so many points on his own. I felt like I could get away with just having Jackson plus Andrews or Jackson plus Brown. I think the only two quarterbacks I did that with this week were Jackson and Josh Allen. Josh Allen, the same thing, just not really multiple receivers that I wanted in those lineups, and another quarterback that runs. But in general, I'll go to at least two pass catchers, and then here I obviously brought it back with Nick Chubb, which ended up being really important. It played out perfectly too, because in the fourth quarter of that game, Chubb happened to break off like an 88-yard touchdown, and then make, I think it was like a 12-point game, and then basically in garbage time, Jackson just found Willie Snead for another 50-yard touchdown. So the game script ended up playing out perfectly for this particular lineup, and I think that's something that's important, because it can be really difficult to project what the actual game script is going to be, but making lineups that will make sense given at least some relatively likely game script, I think, is important. I use the groups and the position stacks tools primarily. Position stacks, I have rules set to have at least one player from the opposing team, and in the groups I use the auto group creator to save a bunch of time, and then just go through and try and narrow my groups down. So my quarterback is paired with two pass catchers, and then basically anybody from the other team, whether it be a running back or another receiver or whatever. Yeah, so far this year I've been putting a big emphasis on playing on FantasyDraft and on Yahoo, just two sites that obviously FantasyDraft doesn't have rake in their tournaments at all. Yahoo either doesn't have rake or has low rake, and it's just, I think, a more profitable tournament to play. So they've been my priority. Last week those were the only two sites I had any volume on. So I think that as long as the contests over there are still decently sized, it's just going to be where my primary focus, or at least the first tournaments I register every week, are at.
How many lineups did you have in this tournament?
150.
150. I think that entry was $28. So you're saving about $3 per entry. So that's like $450 right from the get-go that you're making compared to the other sites, and that's a pretty nice boost. What's your plan now that you've hit this next level? What are you going to do?
Try and not lose it back anytime soon. I mean, the last time I won 100K, I did some stupid things with it, so namely high dollar qualifiers. So not planning on doing that this time. Just it's nice having a little more cushion in the bankroll when obviously you play full time like I do.